I'm Jason from Smoking and Drinking in Space, a sci-fi podcast from a couple guys who think they know sci-fi.
And I'm Rob from Smoking and Drinking in Capes, a superhero podcast from a couple guys who wish they had powers.
And we're part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
And you can find other cool, awesome, geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to episode 297 of Better Podcasting. On this show, we take a 1-week break from our media host discussion, but we have a couple of updates to recap for you.
But first, in this week's Better Podnerings, we're jam-packed with many topics, including more updates, including several pieces of software such as RX11 and Hindenburg, plus there's a personal SP update and Peppa Pig? Huh?
And finally, in this week's Better Podback, we discuss your responses to our Discord server question on podcasting change.
Lauren, never change. Start the show now.
This is Better Podcasting. We are hobby podcasters through and through, just like you. That's why we are different. We minimize the money talk so that you can focus on building a better podcast.
This is episode 297 of Better Podcasting. I am Stephen, and I am pleased to say SP is here this week.
I'm wicked smart because I spent the last week with some MIT guys. It was a fun trip. And on the way home, I saw Niagara Falls for the first time. And right across the way was Canardia. And I was like, hey, that's Canada. That's what's going on over there. So it was a good trip and it was a good week away from podcasting. I actually this time came away refreshed.
Oh, nice.
And just totally, in almost vacation mode, even though it was an intense work trip. I want to emphasize that. It was an intense work trip, but I came back and had kind of decompressed from work here and was able to come back to work refreshed this week in the midst of some issues. But all that to say, it is good to be back podcasting with Stephen on Better Podcasting this week. And we have a jam-packed show for you talking about a lot of different subjects. We're really excited to talk about the different things this week.
And we'll get this out of the way up front here. There is no media host review this week, but we do have some topics to touch on in that section, some follow-ups. We'll be back with a media host review next week. And one of the things that I just wanted to mention back up here a second, I believe as a Canadian, I'm supposed to say we have the good side of Niagara Falls, but I've never been, so I can't really give you a wholehearted ribbing on that. So
now I did not go across the bridge just because of time. I was driving back and spent a couple of hours there, and going across the bridge would have been some more time. But I could tell that the Canadian side was definitely the gem out of the two. Because that's where the huge hotels and casinos and everything was. Like the Embassy Suites was, 30 stories tall. You could see the Niagara Falls clearly from it. The American side is kind of, it's the way it's shaped. It's kind of hidden from the American shore, I guess, or what is it, American side. So yes, I'll concede. Even though I hadn't been over there, it looked like it was the better side out of the two.
Well, come to our Discord if you've been to the Niagara Falls, preferably both sides, and tell us what your review is of both sides. Come to betterpodcasting.com/Discord. And while you're there, why don't you talk some podcast topics as well? Because that's what this show is about podcasting, not the Niagara Falls.
Yeah, I elected not to podcast from the shore of Niagara Falls because can you imagine the background noise?
Oh, man, that'd be brutal.
I know.
All right, the Better Podnerings this week is jam-packed. It's almost like we have less of a segment later in this show, so we put more topics in there. Who would have thought? Let's kick it off talking an update about my Mac, because I said I'm going to report things that I think are relevant to the podcast community. That's the basis of any Mac updates I'll have. If you didn't catch this, I switched a little while back to a Mac. I'm in a trial phase, see how I feel about it. I have some reservations about things, but I want to see, will this work with my podcasting workflow? And so the two updates I wanted to provide about this. Number one in our Discord this week, we actually had a bit of chatter going on about the ID3 tag editor. Now, I ended up buying MP3 tag. This is something that I went and tried to find an ID3 tag editor that I thought was comparable to what I had used on the Windows side of things. And after a bunch of looking around and some problems, which I'll come back to in a second, I did settle on buying MP3 tag. Works really well for me. I think that that is something that is very comparable to what I've used. But in my process, I was doing the thing that we always say not to do, which is just Google and read old articles. And that's what I did because I was struggling to find an ID3 tag editor. And in an old article, I found some reviews about one from PA Software called ID3 tag editor. And I couldn't get it to work. I actually bought it. I spent $10 on it and I couldn't get it to save the files. So in the Discord this week, we got talking about this. And Randy Walker actually found on their website, the page says the download page on the site is a little out of date. It only mentions M1, no M2 and M3, and Mac OS 13, but not 14. That's what Randy had said. So I think this might be the answer that I have finally found of why it didn't work for me. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know a lot about the Mac side of things. I don't. That's part of the journey I'm on right now. And I have, however, read enough to see people comment about the current version of Mac. There's a lot of troubles people have run into. I guess reading between the lines, I think they changed the way some things work, maybe some permissions. I know as I've been looking at some different guides, even things from a year or so ago, some of the permissions seem a little bit different. So I think maybe that's what's happening here, is maybe the problem I ran into is that there's some issue with Mac OS 14. So thanks, Randy, for looking into that. If you are somebody that uses PA Software ID3 tag editor, I'd love to know, did you get that working on the current version of Mac OS? And if so, did you have issues you had to work around? But that's the first thing I wanted to report. And then the second thing in our Discord as well that I thought was worth mentioning here is I had talked about how DaVinci Resolve, when I switched over to Mac, I noticed on the export settings on the free version, there was an option there to hardware encode. My theory is that's why my rendering times were a little faster on the Mac than on the PC. Well, in our Discord, Scatmaker had pointed out that apparently the new version, the one that's currently in beta of Resolve, that's DaVinci Resolve 19, the free version is going to actually enable hardware acceleration on the Windows side of things. Like, it's just going to be a standard included feature on free, apparently. So it's in beta right now. That'll be good once that's released. Maybe that will even things out a little bit. My render times have not really changed. They've been pretty consistently fast, consistently stable as I've exported. And that, honestly, that's kind of been my experience since switching to DaVinci Resolve in general. Even having a fairly modern PC, it was still pretty fast on the Windows side of things as well. So I will more so give that to the DaVinci Resolve column win after many years of very unstable exports on Vegas. So I will say that, but I haven't run into any weird hiccups or anything like that on the Mac side of things.
I'm still thinking about going and updating my Vegas. I'm running Vegas Pro 19 right now, and I want to get up to 21. That's available right now. But with that said, I'm glad that I am living vicariously through you in your transition to your production workflow on a Mac. I just this morning or last night, I logged into my work email and my computer reminded me in October of 2025, it will no longer be able to function. This is my work laptop. It's on my podcast machine, and I will have to it's my own personal one. So I will have to get a new laptop between now and then in order to run Windows 11. And I still don't know what I'm going to do. It'll probably be a cheaper Windows machine that is capable of 11 because I'm just using it to connect with work. But I will also need eventually to update my computer. My choices, of course, are to go to a Mac like you have, or possibly go to the Duo series of Windows laptops. And the Duo series for a laptop, as far as I know, all of them are named Duo. It's like a 17-inch with that second bar screen right underneath it. And for a workflow with podcasting, especially with video editing. I think that would be very useful. So that is what I'm exploring, either one or the other. Haven't made any decisions, haven't seriously compared anything. But if anybody has any advice along those lines, I am open to it, and we can discuss it on a future episode of Better Podcasting.
I will just throw this out here since you mentioned the idea of updating to Vegas. As a reminder, history shows that they update the version of Vegas Pro in August. So if you hold off a little bit more, there might be a new version coming in August, maybe.
Or a deal on 21 as it gets there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to the next point here, which is about RX11, because you and I mentioned this before, that we ended up, I don't know, probably a month or two ago now, we bought a upgrade to RX10 with the promise of an RX11 free upgrade. And you and I think we both got the same email on May 15th. What did it say, SP?
It is time for step 3. All you need to do is head on over to the product portal and find RX11 in your product list and click install. And if you don't see it, try hitting refresh first. The subject, by the way, was your free RX11 upgrade is here. I actually got this email as well. So some of the new features that they're claiming in RX11, by the way, quote, RX11's machine learning algorithms have been supercharged with state-of-the-art neural networks, enabling real-time, low-latency processing for dialogue isolate, the highest quality stem separation for music rebalance, and improved intelligence and speed for repair assistant. Release your tracks with confidence thanks to our industry-first loudness optimization tool and new streaming preview module. Plus, streamline your workflow with major upgrades to our audio random access, ARA, processing, and additional ARA host support coming soon, unquote.
Also, when you go to their site where they talk about the RX11 release, they have top 3 build features there. Basically, the top 3, or the 3 features block at the top of the page talks about clean up dialogue in real time, released music, and brush up audio in seconds. Now, why do we want to bring this up? Well, number 1, looks like some cool updates. Number 2, sounds like a whole bunch of buzzwords. And number 3, I'm curious, because I haven't actually downloaded this yet, if these benefits are actually part of the plugins or if it's in the separate RX software that you have to use for certain features. Because there is a separate audio remastering or audio editing tool or whatever you want to call it that exists with the RX suite. And some of the features are exclusive to that. So I'm curious to get into this and see if any of these actually benefit the plugins or if these are all in that other side of things, all in the additional software. So I look forward to finding out how much has changed, if I see any improvement in things like the dialogue isolate, or if it's just going to be a practical incremental update for me.
Honestly, I did not install the RX10 because I knew the RX11 was going to be coming. I probably should have, and I just didn't. So we'll see what 11 brings me, because I will do that. But in my experience, and Stephen, maybe you're just more used to this than me, whenever there's an update, you got to download it. You have to install it on whatever DAW or video editor that you're using, and then you have to authorize it. So it's a multi-step process, and then you have to figure out how to work it. So it's not like a simple, at least for me, a simple like 15-minute thing. It's like a morning or an afternoon or an evening. So it's not something you can just do off the cuff. It requires some time to do it.
And if you are using a DAW where the plugin is left there, you have to reset up the presets and whatnot, because you got to drop in the new plugin, make them match the old one for the applicable track. So yeah, no, I'm right there with you on that. One thing I want to shout out, though, is when this came out, a couple people in our Discord server did say they had an additional promo on their panel, their loyalty offers there. So if you are somebody who is thinking about it, take a look, because some people did end up getting a bit of a deeper discount than what was offered for the RX10 with the RX11 freebie. And I went and I looked, and I did not see any additional discount for me to go up from standard to advanced. But I did see several people get an upgrade offer to stay within the same suite that they were in. I think they might have been going up a tier, but they didn't take the RX10 deal, and they got an additional discount. So check that out.
Yeah, and I just went into my portal as we were talking to the product portal as we are talking about this, and I don't see my RX11 update. So I'll work on that. We'll get back to everybody next week, see if I came through with that or not. So moving on, Hindenburg actually updated a new version 2.03 build 2618. It came out Wednesday, the 15th of May, 2024. And there was a lot of updates. One of the biggest ones is multi-track transcriptions. I think this is a unique DAW. I mean, you can use any DAW that you want to create your podcast, but if you have a narrative style podcast, a playthrough style podcast, a interview heavy podcast where maybe you have multiple interviews in the same individual episode, or if you're converting an interview into a narrative style show, that Hindenburg is a useful tool for you to at least check out. And it is heartwarming, I guess, to see that they're still increasing the capabilities, and they're also going all in with transcription. We talked about transcription a couple of weeks ago with Apple Podcasts coming out with transcription automatically in the app. We've seen some of the chinks in the armor for Apple Podcasts. They might not know your specific lingo to your niche. Maybe it's a very technical term, maybe it's a slang term that you're using, and you might want to go in and correct that over time. If you can do that straight from your DAW to begin with, and then replace the transcript, because Apple allows you to do that, then that might reduce your workflow if you're somebody that goes all in with transcription. Personally, I'm not. I will take the automatic transcription and just run with it, because I, as a hobby podcaster, don't have the time for that. But I know a lot of people out there like the idea of having a transcript there for accessibility purposes, as well as for possible SEO purposes as well. So if you're in that camp, then Hindenburg has some new features for you to check out.
One of the things that I noticed on this news thing was they go, "We understand that each of you has a unique production need. That's why our new feature includes options for selective transcription. Whether you need to transcribe a specific section or isolate an isolated sentence in different languages, you can easily select what you need to transcribe." And the reason I wanted to call this out is because in some of the tools that I've seen that have done transcriptions, you've had to do almost the entire source clip. So like with us, you and I are recording pre-show, post-show, we have all this stuff, and then I dump it into my editor, do a bunch of edits. And in some of the software I've seen, I'd have to go back and transcribe the entire raw original footage, and then I guess it would sort of work its way into the editor. I'm not entirely sure, but I always think to myself, like, what a waste of time. Like, why doesn't it, I just say, like, transcribe this section or transcribe the edit and whatnot. So I think that that's a smart thing, especially because with social media, the social media factor, people posting short clips online, on a lot of those short form video platforms, having subtitles is really important. It's become a really well accepted thing in things like YouTube Shorts and TikToks, where they're just burnt in on screen. And so people who are doing social media, I think being able to go in and just do transcriptions and I assume convert them to subtitles, or, burnt in subtitles or just burnt in transcripts or whatever you're going to call it, this would be a great thing to have. And so I am really bad myself at doing anything with transcripts, but I recognize it's becoming a more increasingly important thing in certain people's workflows.
We'll see what our audience has to say about Hindenburg, because I know we have a few people in our community that use Hindenburg. Moving on, we're going to talk about a very special deal that came across our web space here on a Discord server. There is a channel for deals, and what do we call it? Deals and bargains. And people post stuff that comes along. Well, there was a Slick deal that came out, and I don't know where the origin of this. Slick deal is just a reflection of the deals that are out there. But Rode, so this comes in several parts. Rode, they decided to put a deal out there to put free headphones. They're I forget what they're called. They're basically studio monitoring headphones a pair free with a purchase of several items, including a Rodecaster Pro 2 and a Rodecaster Duo. So you have that out there. It's $100 or $99 US. It's $100. So you get that for free. Well, also along the lines, B&H Photo combined that deal with a $125 coupon and 6 months free of Buzzsprout, which is, in full disclosure, is off our short list after we reviewed Buzzsprout as a podcast media host, and a 6-month subscription to Riverside. So you had all this for the low price of not $4.99 anymore, but $374. So
Markin.
Yeah, American. And I know Stephen has something to say about that in a second. And okay, what we've said all along was that the Rodecaster Duo and Rodecaster Pro 2 were a little excessively priced when they came out. We thought they should be lower. And I think along the lines, I said when we were talking about that, the Rodecaster Duo should be about $300. I think I'd have to go back and look at the transcript for that episode and find out for sure, right? But the Rodecaster Pro 2, I think, is also a little high. So when it came out on a sale and you add at least the headphones to it for $374, that becomes a deal. Now, I've never used the headphones. I can't vouch for them one way or the other, but that then becomes a deal in the realm of that's what I would expect it to be. So there was talk in our Discord server about who's going to get it and who didn't. I know personally, and I'm not going to call either of them out, I know 2 people in our community that actually went out and bought them. So we'll see once they install them and use them if they encounter any issues, either similar to the ones that we've either noticed ourselves or uncovered through our community, or new ones, basically. So we'll see how that goes. But there's 2 listeners out there right now with Rodecaster Pro or Rodecaster Duo. I keep on wanting to say Pro. Rodecaster Duos from this deal, which I think is in the affordable, quote unquote, affordable range for the capabilities that it's supposed to be. So we'll see how that goes. And Stephen, I have more to say, but
Sure.
Stephen, you have things to say as well.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I looked to see if it was in Canada because, as we said, that was Markin. It was an American deal. And I looked, it was not. There was no sign of sale that I found up here. Thought about the idea of bringing it in. Bunch of different ways I could do that. A big item like that, I generally don't because, there's going to be, if I use an import service, which is the most reliable way, there'll be taxes in the destination location. Then there'll be Canadian taxes. I could try to ship it directly from the deal provider, but if it's not a specific shipping service, I'm probably going to have to pay a massive brokerage fee because that's just what seems to always happen because basically the seller chooses the cheapest shipping, which then that company charges a huge brokerage fee to come in. So long story short, didn't see it. It was pretty much long story long, but didn't see a deal. And I was thinking about this though, like, let's say the deal was possible. Was it something I would buy? And the way I was thinking is like, I'm leaning towards no, because based off of the challenges that you had with your Rodecaster Pro 2, still have the Mackie problem that I have, because now they're owned by Rode. It feels like for me, I would probably think about waiting and spending the money elsewise on something else, or seeing, more reviews about the Rodecaster Duo if they follow suit with your Rodecaster Pro 2. But also, like, let's be real here. My Better Podcasting co-host here has had lots of problems with his Rodecaster Pro 2 that he was very excited to buy, spend lots of money. So I want to stand in solidarity with him against Big Rodema. That's just something that, stick it to the man. And so that's what I thought, push comes to shove, I will stay in solidarity with USP.
All right. I appreciate that very much. So I went to Slick Deal. I saw the deal and I had $374 just burning in my pocket. I actually, I saved. So I have equipment upgrade money and I was like, this is it. this is the deal. So I got so excited. I bought not only one, but I bought two of them.
You bought two? Why do you have two DeWalts in front of you? I don't get it. That's not a Rodecaster Pro or Rodecaster Duo.
There is two. One's a 3/8 inch head and one's a 1/2 inch head.
Okay.
And it's a cordless ratchet.
I am so confused. For the audio listener, he's held up two battery powered DeWalt ratchets. I don't get that. That's not two Rodecaster Duos. Is that what you?
No, I didn't say I bought two Rodecaster Duos.
I see. You just decided that your money was better spent elsewise. That's following right. Now. I get it now.
Folks, this was live. He was not prepped with it whatsoever, other than I said, and I bought two of them on the show notes, and he had no idea what was coming. So this actually goes along with a point that I'm going to make later, by the way. But yes, I did buy, I used that same money, and I bought tools. I bought cordless ratchets. And for me, I think that's a better use of my money. Now, I did think, honestly, Stephen, you know what? We could use some of that money that we have set aside, and I could buy you one and I could ship it to you. We didn't discuss this at all, but I was like, I could do this because I know it's probably not going to be available in Canada. And in that case, just in case anybody's wondering, I get it and then I ship it to Stephen. So I pay that additional shipping and we work through the customs issues and stuff like that. It's very cumbersome. And I feel for all Canadians that they're not able to take part in deals like this when it comes along. That said, if they work, if the Rodecaster Pro 2 works, if the Rodecaster Duo works, and we've said this all along, it's an amazing capability. So I am rooting for every single person that went ahead and got one of these on the deal. And I really hope it works for you. And I want to hear back from you if it does work from you. I also want to hear back from you if it does not work for you, so we can make a further recommendation. I decided not to do it because I'm just going to use the money for other things, like I said, and I did. So there you go. that was my deal there. So congratulations, Stephen. You're in solidarity with me, and you've stayed the course. Perfect. And I appreciate it. I stayed the course as well.
And I just want to sort of latch on to what you just said, which is that I do hope that this does work for everybody, and I do want to know more. And when I had tried the Mackie DLZ Creator XS, I think I talked a bit about it on here. A big reason I went for that one was because of SP's history with the Rodecaster Pro 2, and I just couldn't take that gamble with the Rodecaster Duo. So having more people with that out there, I really hope to hear more positive success stories, and maybe, if I revisit that purchase, it might even things out a little bit more. So I look forward to that. Please let us know, everybody, in our Discord, or email podcast@betterpodcasting.com. And if you'd like to know more about the ratchets that SP bought, come on over. Maybe we need to create like a Tool Talk channel or something.
He'll definitely be discussed in the next Gonna Geek, because I found something out about the batteries. We'll talk about that over there. Yeah. Okay, we're going to continue on our Rode rant right now. It's not really a rant.
Whoa. We're going to continue on the road of Rode Talk.
Okay, there you go. I like that much better. So Rode actually came out with a new device, and I actually like this microphone. It's the PodMic microphone in whatever version that you get. I believe there's 3 different versions. I think there's a USB only version. There's the PodMic XLR. I think there's one that combines both. I could be wrong about that, but there's at least 2 PodMic versions, and I have used it before. Stephen has used one before. I have a co-host on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. that uses them. It is a decent microphone. It's very heavy, very robust. One of the issues that we encountered with the PodMic is the fact that it is very susceptible to plosives. So Rode actually took that feedback and they ran with it, and they did something better. So instead of putting a big, huge windscreen on the front of it, like Stephen and I currently have on top of our SM7Bs, they went ahead and designed a colorful, you can choose whatever color, and it looks kind of like a grill, and it just goes over the top of the PodMic, and it just makes it stand out. So if you're on stream like we are right now, and you want to have your microphone pop out a little bit, you have several different colors to choose from, including black, if that's what you want to maintain the black microphone image on your video. Or if you just like having some razzle dazzle in your studio, it's available. And I did take a look at these, and I am very interested in trying one out to see how it does with the pops in comparison to a normal windscreen that we use, or at least that I used when I was using the pod mic. So if you have a pod mic, I wouldn't go get a pod mic to just get this, but I don't know, maybe the style gets you. Then it's really cool to see this, and it's really cool to see the company respond to maybe some criticism about a microphone that is one of the most talked about microphones when you talk about buying your first set of gear.
I love this. I think that this is such a good way to address it, and definitely address it in a way that almost tips it back towards in favor of them because of that color. There's a lot of people who do pay attention to how something looks. They have a theme. They care about the visual aspect, especially with all those video podcasts on YouTube there, or I should just say all those YouTube podcasts. So definitely, I think there's a market for this, and it just gives people a little extra love towards their equipment if they can customize it a bit. And I like when people talk gear, and if this gets people talking gear in some capacity because it's got a little extra shine, I just hope that the pop filter works good as well. I guess we'll wait and see. I think it said shipping in June.
Yeah, I'm just looking at their website right now because I couldn't remember all the colors. Their website, their promotional picture has red and pink or purple. I don't know, fuchsia. I don't know what that color is called. Orange, light green, light blue, and gray. So, and I know they have black because I looked into it. So yeah, this is, and I guess they only have 2 different pod mics. My bad. I'm thinking there might be 3. But yeah, I think this will razzle dazzle your podcast up. And also, if you're somebody that needs to differentiate the microphone for whatever speaker, like if you have a playthrough podcast, basically, and you have to have people sit down in specific spots because you have your, I don't know, Zoom P8 or your Rodecaster Pro 2 that is dialed into them, it would be nice to have their specific microphone color coded to them. And maybe you can buy a color coded XLR cable just to make the whole thing, a little bit more color coordinated. I know we're hobby podcasters and we're on a budget, but sometimes little stuff like that can actually assist.
It's, a stage thing that used to happen. That's well, the mic windscreens on stage mics and stuff, different colors for that reason. But yep, let us know if you've tried out the WS14. I got a really quick, weird, Better Podnering here as we continue down our many topics this week. It's about Peppa Pig, SP.
Peppa Pig? Well, I don't even know what Peppa Pig is, so enlighten me.
I came across this article, and for those of you who don't have kids or haven't had kids within the last 20 years, or who wasn't a kid in the last 20 years, I feel old, you might not be familiar with Peppa Pig. Well, what you need to know is Peppa Pig is a British kids cartoon that has a worldwide reach. And basically it is about a pig family. And I know my kids back in the day watched Peppa Pig, and I've seen at various outdoor parties, Peppa Pig themed parties of different kids' friends and things like that. So Peppa Pig is a thing. Well, apparently Peppa Pig is getting a brand new podcast from Audible. So what they say is that the series will consist of 6 episodes, each 15 minutes long, that are set to launch on July 11th. Now, why did I want to bring up Peppa Pig on here? Because it was a bit of an awakening moment for me. I find this really interesting because I have been around, my kids have talked about podcasting, but not just because of me, because they've had podcasting brought up through the media they consume, through even schools and things like that. And it never really occurred to me that, yeah, children's entertainment has changed so much in even the last 20 years since Peppa Pig started, that maybe children's entertainment at some point will be more into the world of podcasting, because it does evolve, and maybe this is, the next crack at trying to get into the younger generations that will end up eventually consuming podcasts long term. Or maybe there's a market study out there that says kids are getting into podcasts young. So it's really just something that really made me want to open my eyes a bit to what are the trends of younger demographics and where that might lead for podcasting in the future. Or is this just a case that they're really hoping, the big money into podcasting is like, okay, we shoved a bunch of money in there the first time, didn't work out. Let's get them young. Let's just, try to craft this, and we'll start to see them try to play the long game of getting kids involved in podcasting so later they can sell it to them and market it and packet it and all that other stuff that they do.
Maybe. So I have a question for you. Are Peppa Pig and Babe related?
I think in the sense that they both could become dinner, maybe.
That'll do, Stephen. That'll do.
All right, that's all I wanted to mention about Peppa Pig. You wanted to mention something about hogging your resources.
I do. Kind of a public service announcement, but I'm going to throw in a little rant here because this is kind of pervasive in podcasting right now. Whether you're a hobby podcaster or an independent podcaster or professional podcaster, whatever, I see a lot of people that, and we've talked about this before, about overloading the resources available to you, whether it's the bandwidth on your internet or it's the capabilities on your PC. Let's talk some cold turkey here. Let's talk some reality, right? You cannot do everything on your computer. I know you want to save money. I know you want to use free tools, but you cannot do everything on your singular PC, whether it's a Mac or a Windows-based PC. You cannot do all of these all at once. You cannot record audio multitrack. You cannot record multiple 1080 or 4K streams. You cannot use an audio routing program like Audio Hijack or Voice Meter. You cannot stream out to multiple locations at 4K or even 1080. You cannot digitally process your audio. You cannot add scene graphic effects. You cannot share a video, and you cannot play a video game all at once. And you cannot do a good portion of those all at once. It's just not going to happen. Your PC has a limited amount of resources, and you're going to overload your processor, not necessarily your memory, but your processor. And yes, I know you have that kick-ass 490 graphics card from NVIDIA, but it's just not going to keep up with 4K streams that are coming into your computer from different sources, like different cameras or different online connections that you have, and record all those individually and stream them out. It's just not going to happen. You're going to overload your machine, and it's not going to be able to do that. So my advice to you, if you want to do all of this, is to offload as much as you possibly can. We've actually talked about this before on Better Podcasting, but I'm going to foot stomp it, as Stephen loves me to say. And I am going to say this as a public service announcement. You need to get as much off your singular computer as you can. Yes, you have a better computer than you had 10 years ago, hopefully, but it's still not going to be able to do everything you want, especially because we've upped our quality from 720 to 1080 to 4K. Now, in full disclosure, we're streaming somewhere between 720 and 1080 just because of those resource limitations that I just talked about. But you have that. And if you're not using a device like Stephen and I are using, whether it's a DBX 286 or a Rodecaster Pro 2 or a Mackie or a Rodecaster Duo, that is digital signal processing that can occur off your computer. So you don't have to do it within Voice Meter. You don't have to do it within OBS. I know that you might not have the money to have one of those machines. I get that. But if you do that, then don't try to record 4 different cameras that are coming in for 4K. You're going to have to make some trade-offs in order to not have problems, not lose recordings, not have issues with recordings. And also, if you're streaming out to a live audience, which I know a lot of you are trying to do right now, I mean, we do it as well, you're going to run into less issues because you're not trying to do everything on one singular machine.
Yeah. My biggest experience, I think, dealing with this sort of thing was back when I was traveling regularly for work. I had the laptop that I had owned at the time that wasn't ideal for doing some streaming and stuff. But what I always found was that when I did tax my laptop too much, it just made editing such a pain. There was occasionally dropouts or time shift where basically it was inconsistent clock time. So you'd get digital drift. So I'd have to go back and constantly move myself over throughout the recording, or I'd get audio artifacts like clicks and pops. And I made it work, but in the end, I actually opted for going with a degraded audio experience by using Zoom H1 in a weird roundabout way to capture a microphone. That to me was the winner between the two things, either software recording on my laptop or still getting an offload of hardware recording. So yeah, it definitely is a problem in my experience if you tax your machine too much. And yep, I can finally say it because I've got enough experience. It applies to Mac too. I can say it firsthand now. I've seen it.
I really hope at some point in time we'll get to the point where a simple podcasting can be done in that matter, where you're doing it on a singular laptop and you have multiple video, multiple audio coming in. So if you can offload multiple track audio recordings to individual devices, I record Legends of Shield over the internet, and I have my co-hosts record their own personal tracks locally on a separate machine, an audio recording device. I've asked for that. Some of them use the software like a DAW as well, but not everybody does. And the people that do use DAWs, even on Legends of Shield, I notice a significant lag issue where I'm always correcting where the audio is and where the video is. And I'm correcting where the video is individually, because StreamYard can do individual recording sessions, which I'm taxing their computers to do that. So I'm taking the hit on that. And I'm having to move the sync of the audio and the video around to the point where it sounds and looks good. So that's additional encumbering issues in post-processing that I have to do because of it. So it's not just a grip it and rip it recording and getting it out. I am at the very least doing sync issues for the editing in post-processing. So I understand that everybody wants to get there. And I wholeheartedly think in 5-10 years, maybe we'll get to that point. We're just not at that point right now. I know there's a lot of tools available, whether they're individual through Rode or Spreaker or Rodecaster or, the Mackie or OBS or, you name your software, you name your DAW. But you can't have everything running at the same time. You need to clear some space on your computer, and you can't have a backup running at the same time. You can't have that's why I said play a video game or share a video. I should have put in there, had the backup going at the same time. You can't do everything, and you're going to have to make your determination of what is too much and then back off. And then the last thing that I'll say on this whole thing is it is okay in 2024. It will be okay in 2025. It will be okay for the rest of time to have an audio only podcast. You don't have to do video. You don't have to encumber yourself with the cost, the capabilities, and the time necessary to do a video show. We do that here on Better Podcasting because, quite frankly, Stephen loves to do it. So that's why we're doing it here. But you can also just do an audio only show, and there are plenty of audio only shows that are successful. So just think of that. If it's too much for you, you don't have to do video. Audio's fine.
Now for our last Better Podnering before we get to a brief media host update segment, it comes from the world of SP. Now before we get to your point, SP, I just want to say that, one of the things that I just love so much about my week in and week out is that I can always look forward to hearing you every week on an episode of Legends of Shield.
Yeah, Legends of Shield has been going on for a long time. I took over the podcast by, I believe, episode 14, and we have well over 500 episodes. And I've either been on every single episode or I produced every single episode. And unfortunately, I've gotten to the point And we've talked about it before, of the changes that I was making in the show, of how it's presented. Made it shorter, made some changes in the show, revamped the show, updated the show, everything like that at the beginning of the year. And now I am about half a year in, and not quite, but we've ended our coverage of X-Men 97. There's no new actual Marvel Studios content until July, when the Deadpool versus Wolverine movie is coming out. And even after that, there's only one more series, at least that's on the docket right now. And that's the Agatha series on Disney Plus in the fall sometime. I don't know if fall could mean September, fall could mean November, December to Disney Plus. I don't know, but it'll be somewhere in there. So I took a look at, assessed what we had done so far this year and how it was working for me personally, because one of my issues that I had was I just didn't have the amount of time to put into Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. as I once did. And I was balancing that with the type of content that we were getting. X-Men 97, in my opinion, is one of the best series ones of any TV show ever. It was that good. So I'm glad we podcasted about it, and I'm glad I stuck with it. But when I take a look at, there's no new content coming out. If you want to say there's new content coming out with the Sony stuff, yeah, go ahead, you can. But the Sony productions based on Marvel Comics have not been as good whatsoever as Marvel, and Marvel's even reduced in its quality over the past couple of years as well. So I did not want to be podcasting over a subject that was going to frustrate me even more, because I have stuff I have to do around the house. I want to move to Florida. And in order to do that, I have to sell my house. And in order to sell my house, I have to fix things. I've got to get it sale ready. I've got to get that car out of my garage that I've had in my garage for quite some time. So I need time to do that. And even with the shorter show for Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., say we record every Saturday at 10 a.m., I'm still editing in some cases. And even though it's a 20 to 25 minute show, I'm still editing into the evening. Now, granted, I take some time off to like mow the lawn or something like that, but it's entirely too long that I'm spending for the return that I'm getting for it. So I decided to tell my co-hosts a couple of weeks ago that I was only going to do the Marvel Cinematic Universe content, the Marvel Studios content for the rest of the year. And I was not going to produce or record any other shows as we went forward for the year. I put it on them. I said, you guys are more than welcome to record and edit a show, but I'm not going to do anything with it. This is going to be on you. And it is not going to be nothing to do with me. And I will wholeheartedly support you as much as I can, which leads into other issues. Like this week, I was dealing with trying to get my Dropbox cleaned out so I can put all the elements in so they could use it to produce the show. But they decided, a little spoiler there, they decided to go ahead and try to produce it on their own. I don't know how far they're going to make it, but they are determined to finish our review or continue our review of X-Men Evolution. It was an X-Men animation show that came out in the 2000s. So they are committed to wanting to do that, and probably some of the Sony stuff that comes out later this year. And I wholeheartedly support them, but I am stepping back from being the main producer outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe proper stuff for the rest of the year, in order so that I can focus on stuff around the house, which is why I got these cordless ratchets, because I'll be doing some car work. And for those of you that don't know, these cordless ratchets can really enhance working on cars because of the tight spaces that cars provide you. So that's what my plan is for the rest of the year. I'm not leaving Better Podcasting. I'm not foregoing any other podcasting commitments that I have. Like Gonna Geek's gonna go on once a month, like we're planning on. It's not even a hiatus from Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's just that I am not going to review things that my heart's not going to be in it. And my heart will be in as the more and more I see it. The Deadpool versus Wolverine movie is going to be hilarious. I'm looking forward to that, but I'm not looking forward to anything else this year. So I'm only going to podcast on the stuff that I want to. And I guess that's a good PSA for hobbyists. If you're podcasting on something, make sure, in my opinion, that you podcast on something that you're passionate about, because if you're not passionate about it, it becomes a burden really quick.
Yeah, it is hard when you, like you said, you're doing a podcast on something that your heart's not in, but I have faith for you that you'll use that time to find something that your heart does like, so your heart will go on, SP.
Of course. And, I might even make a bigger door so my heart can go on.
All jokes aside, I do think, though, that this is something that I'm glad you mentioned it as a PSA, because it is something that I think it's easy for podcasters to get in the habit of something that they enjoy doing to some degree. And I know that you do enjoy, aspects of this. But it's easy to not take that time to self-reflect a little bit and think about your whole situation of what you're doing. Is there somewhere other way to spend your time? Could you do something even just to enhance the podcast? I know you had looked at that before and everything. And so I think that it is a good reminder, something like this, that everybody should take a chance to look at what you're doing, especially if you're a hobby podcaster. Make sure you are enjoying what you're doing. And the other aspect of it that I just wanted to call out on this, is I think your co-host over there, kudos to them for wanting to continue on, because that's a big change for them as well. Not just the extra time and the effort that's going to be involved with the production workflow. That is a big bite of the apple to take in itself, but just the dynamic change by somebody switching. And, somebody that has generally been, I'll call it the lead voice. And I say that because on that show, you tend to, not as like the top billed voice in that sense, but in the case that you lead the show, a lot of times you help direct the show through the conversation. And so it's a dynamic change. And that's not taking away from your co-host. Everybody has very good things to say on that show. But generally with a lot of podcasts, there's one voice, especially in, big discussion podcasts, there's one voice that tends to guide along the open conversation. And so I think that's going to be a dynamic change over there. And I think that's, again, kudos to them for doing that. And I look forward to seeing how that goes. And so kudos to all y'all, you for assessing, and for them for being willing to take that on. So if you're listening, kudos to everybody involved.
I will be listening to the shows as they produce them, but I will be listening to them from my podcatcher, not from the microphone or my headphones.
So let's go and get into our very brief media host discussion this week. All right, we mentioned it. We got no media host review this week, but we wanted to take a little bit of time, emphasis on little bit of time, to give a few updates that are to do with some past media hosts that we've reviewed and things that we think are just worth considering. They're not really affecting our review per se, but they were to do with elements that we discussed during our review. And we thought that this would be a good opportunity to just give a few high-level highlights of some things that we had taken note of ourselves since reviewing said media hosts. And the first one that we want to mention right now is Pinecast. Now, we did talk a little bit about this before, but it's happened frequently enough that it's worth mentioning as a point that SP, on multiple occasions since we've reviewed Pinecast, has tried to log into the panel, the dashboard, and run into issues trying to access the panel. Now, we were curious, like, is, this something that Pinecast is still even being supported? Is this something that the creator has stepped back from? And so last week, 2 weeks ago, after the show, SP and I got talking, and we looked in, and we looked at Reddit, and we looked at some other things, and we did see signs of activity still actively going on with Pinecast, so that alleviated a bit of that concern. But you've seen it enough that we thought we would mention right now that we talk about reliability. If we were to probably redo the Pinecast episode, we'd probably take note that we had run into this a couple of times.
Yeah, and it's the back end. It's the podcaster logging into the dashboard that's been the issue. Every time that I've noticed this, I try to download an episode from one of my shows that, like Better Podcasting Chats with SP, just to see if it works, and it does. So the actual podcast availability hasn't been affected, but the ability to change or update a post or put a new one in, that is temporarily, and I will say temporary. Sometime I think the longest outage I noticed was in 2 hours, but I haven't noticed anything recently because I haven't logged in the last couple of weeks, but it had been pervasive. What really, the one thing that really uh, enlightened me on what was going on with Pinecast was their change blog on their website was pretty active. So I was very happy with that, and that it wasn't being left to rot or anything. And maybe some of the downtimes have been because they were changing some stuff on the dashboard side, on the back end side. So I'll keep my eyes open for it. But on Reddit, there was a post after years, and it was responded to by Matt pretty quickly, and the change blog was being actively updated. So we did have some concerns that the social media presence was not there anymore, like on the X. I think Matt has left X, so it wasn't there. And I don't know where he is on his social media, but I know he's on Reddit. So between that and the blog, it's great. And we've also noticed at least an increased support for something new.
Yeah, they did Pod Squeeze apparently. So there's now the opportunity to prepare episode notes, transcripts, and other apparently related pieces of information for your podcast. They use the term "and more" with Pod Squeeze. So I hadn't heard of Pod Squeeze, but I did like seeing that this was in here just from that aspect that we were talking about, the desire for an all-in-one option of a media host. No, this isn't video, but the more that a podcaster can do in the media host, the easier potentially it gets for them. So I like that they are at least doing that.
Yeah, that's the biggest reason why we're even looking into it, is a bunch of people are saying, I want an all-in-one solution. We haven't found one yet after Anchor.fm is getting rid of theirs. Spotify for podcasters, I know, but the old tools were Anchor.fm tools. So we'll see how this gets reconstituted or is just left to not be replaced. We also had some updates from other media host providers that we looked into already. RSS.com, after our review, they got back with us and they said that they were working on brand new analytics, which will hopefully allow deeper episode level metrics. So that is very heartening that we see that. And we did have a back and forth with them, and we were looking for areas where we could collaborate. And I won't detail anything on the podcast here. There's nothing that's active right now. I hope that they've taken our suggestions and that they are considering it at least, and we'll get back with everybody in case that pans out. And then also on Buzzsprout, we've talked about it before, but I just wanted to highlight it in this list here. Buzzsprout, they created fan mail, which is the ability to text the show back. So that was new and inspirational and got the talk of the podcast space for a couple of weeks as they brought that out. So that was interesting. Full disclosure, RSS.com and Buzzsprout are not on our short list. Pinecast still is. The next one is Podbean, which is still on our short list. They rolled out a new feature, I think on the 15th, which is a week ago, that you can turn your podcast into a YouTube video. So that is now a capability within Podbean, and we'll see how that pans out. I haven't looked into it. Stephen, did you actually read this? I did not have time to. I just saw the headline for it.
No, I didn't. I saw the same headline as you, and I was a little excited. I have to admit I was a little excited because one of the things when I look back at our Podbean review is I remember being left with like a feeling of disappointment, like it was feeling almost neglected a bit. I just remember it was like, okay, this doesn't seem that new compared to when I last looked at it. So seeing them roll out a new feature was encouraging for me. I'll use the word encouraging.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm too excited over turning an episode into a video and being a static image over on YouTube, But I know a lot of people are going that way right now, and we'll see what YouTube and YouTube Music, when their podcasting, does with all of this eventually. But I guess seeing any sort of innovation is good, and that they will continue to innovate in the future. Whether or not you are excited about this specific one, we'll see. The last update that we have is with Simplecast, which as of yesterday has now completely changed their name. They're now Simplecast AdsWiz. They're part of AdsWiz, AdsWiz, AdsWizz. And I think this basically is a telltale of where they're going. Simplecast, after our review, was not on our short list, and it would be doubly not on our short list because of this. But this definitely tips their hat into, they're going into the professional podcaster, the ad space. They want that ad revenue, and okay, you go for it. If it's a business model that fits what you're going to do, I think Simplecast can help hopefully pull it off and maintain their market share. It's just not going to be for us with hobby podcasting and with our shows, and specifically with Better Podcasting. But they, they have now clearly branded themselves of what they are.
Yeah, and when you look at the logo, it now says Simplecast by AdsWiz. Wonder how long we see the Simplecast name stick around. My personal speculation. Time will tell.
Well, yeah, we saw Anchor go away with Spotify for podcasts, so this could be the same thing.
So those are just a few quick highlights that we wanted to bring up. We will be back with a media host review next week, but it's time to get to the Better Podback.
This is where we here at Better Podcasting turn the show over to you as we run through some of your feedback. We call this segment Better Podback.
All right, we had a big Better Podnerings this week, so we just got a couple of Better Podbacks, but I wanted to start off by saying I was wrong. That's always a good day when I'll admit that I was wrong.
Yes, it is a good podcasting day.
So if you don't remember this, a few episodes back, we had Waffles, past guest of the show Waffles, infamous podcaster Waffles, and expert waffle maker Waffles. He was experimenting with Reaper, and I said that I had a speculation of why he had started to experiment with Reaper again. Well, him and I chatted offline, and I was wrong with my speculation. It's not worth calling out here now. It's nothing glorious, but also it involves promoting another show that I have no problem promoting the show. I listen to them quite regularly, but I just don't feel like, working a little pluggy plug into this episode. But I will say I was wrong. So he went to our Discord and asked if people had guesses about why he had tried Reaper. And we did have Alrun said, "You read an article that started with, 'Try this one weird trick in Reaper,' end quote." First, great clickbait title writing, Alrun. You need to start writing the titles for our show. So thank you.
He is big into AI, just saying.
Secondly, we did have a response. And what Waffle said was, "I was exploring the idea of getting the pro version of Waveform because of a trim silence feature. While I was looking at YouTube to figure out how it worked, I saw Reaper has this option and it works a lot better. So I tried it, and holy guacamole, it's nice." So you know that it is getting rave reviews when guacamole gets worked into the sentence.
I mean, yeah. I mean, are we talking like bitter guacamole? Are we talking sour? Are we just talking the creamy stuff? I mean, there's wholly different versions of guacamole. So I need to know. But yeah, it's great that he's trying Reaper and working with a different DAW. That is always, it's a plus minus, because usually you're leaving something that is less capable to something that's more capable. But at the same time, you're learning an entirely different new workflow. And for us podcasters that have a workflow, it's like, oh man, I know it's going to save me time, but dang, I need to learn something new. So we'll see how Waffles reacts to that long term, because I know he'll tell us, because he'll remind me in like 3 months, when you guys talked about that on Better Podcasting. Well, here's my update. So I'm looking forward to your update eventually, Waffles. We also had a question that I asked. I will admit it wasn't Stephen taking over my account. It was me. And I just asked, what's the most notable thing that has changed in podcasting since you started? So
Can I start?
Can
I start?
You can start whenever you want.
Because the most notable thing was the question. And the reason I interrupted you so excitedly, because mine is a super exciting thing. As we know, I have been podcasting longer than you.
That's
so
true, you have.
The most notable thing is you starting podcasting. That's my answer. 100% final answer. Give me the $1 million, Regis.
That's on all the wikis and all the fan wikis and everything. It's the date that I started podcasting, December 31st, 2010.
Yeah, so there you go. That's my answer, and I don't think it can be topped. So my apologies to everybody else that we're going to go through the responses right now. They pale in comparison to my response.
Yakko had an interesting response that I agreed to. He said the ease of doing video plus audio thanks to things like StreamYard. And I will say, yeah, thanks to things like StreamYard. They all seem to degrade after a while. So especially with StreamYard being bought out, I'm really hesitant about the long-term life of StreamYard. So we'll see. I know Riverside is fraught with issues. And Stephen, I have to talk to you after we get offline on Riverside, and that might be a topic for next time around. Anthony from Capes on the Couch, he said, Descript allowing you to edit through transcripts saves me so much time. Plus, I get a transcript that's like 99% accurate. Now, Stephen, you and I, we grew up in podcasting when you were using the actual waveforms. You're like in Audacity or Adobe, and you were looking at those waveforms and you were making all the edits according to the waveforms. If you enter podcasting today, you don't need to know what a waveform even looks like. You can go in and edit through transcripts. There are some detriments to it, but I think the fact that you could even do it is amazing compared to where we started out with.
Yeah, when you see answers like this and you think about where we started, it definitely highlights that you and I are old fuddy-duddies, and there are things that we do every day in our workflows that maybe somebody's listening to our show going, why do you do it that way? Like, you know,
why do you use an ID3 tagger?
Exactly. So I think why did you spend $30 for one and $10 for another? But, you know, I think that it's a good highlight that it's good idea if you're podcasting and looking for podcast advice to listen to a bunch of different sources. You know, it's like anything in the modern world. If you're going to go build yourself a deck, go on YouTube, look at a bunch of different things, and then actually look at your building codes and build it right. But you know, look at everybody's approach and find the right one that works for you. Maybe the deck's a bad example. You don't want people falling down on it.
Nope. And ironically, I have to redo my back stairs this summer. So that's something that I have to do. Anyway, moving on. Damien the DM said access to equipment, both in companies working on stuff for podcasters, but also in making things more affordable for a hobbyist. Ding, 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 ding. Damien, third unofficial co-host of Better Podcasting. You're doing great there. I think this is a key thing because before, I want to say 2017, 2018 timeframe, you had to really look at misusing things or using things that were not meant for podcasting, whether it was hardware or software. You're really cobbling things together. And now it's just made for streamers. You can podcast, you can stream, and you have tools that are in hardware that are made for it. And I think that you're absolutely correct. And it's more affordable too now, because I remember when I first started podcasting, my very first podcast was on a multi-track capable mixer, but it was via Firewire and it was a $10,000 mixer, right? I didn't own it. It was the people that I was guest hosting with, but a $10,000 mixer. And now I can do more better things with a mixer that is $700. Right. So
yeah,
that's progress for you. It's more affordable. I don't think I could have ever afforded a $10,000 mixer. I could have, but I would have not bought a car. What I have now, even though the problems I have with it, very, very affordable in comparison. So I think you're spot on there, Damien.
I think Mike's is a good example of this one as well. Like you and I, we've alluded to this over the time that we have a bunch of equipment to sell. You and I both have a bunch of microphones that we never ended up reviewing because the market changed. We had a bunch of things that we had planned to do, a bunch of shootouts and things like that. And then all of a sudden there's podcast specific microphones blowing up, and it's like, what's the point anymore? So I think the microphones are a great example, even just from like an average Joe perspective of microphone etiquette. Like before, it was you're using a stage microphone. So you got to get yourself up close. You got to get yourself right on that microphone. You got to keep a consistent tone. And it was a way that people had to learn how to use a microphone. Well, now you have things that are meant, like the pod mic, to sit back a little bit, be a little bit more flexible to people who are a little more dynamic in their delivery, and be able to just be more of themselves. But you didn't have that option before. It was like you were using a stage mic or a very expensive broadcast microphone, which 99% of the people couldn't afford.
NVIDIA broadcasting software, right? To do the audio cleanup live, that we would have never thought would be possible when we both started. So that's just another example. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. Original Waffles Play Comics. This is my co-host over on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D., or one of them. He said the AI and other magic that tech pulls off. For example, Reaper can cut the silence out of tracks and shorten the gaps. Great for when we both awkward pause. Also, how hard is it to keep up with getting guests, since there are so many platforms now that people use for social media? And I will say there's also so many platforms that you can go on specifically to get guests. So mostly professional platforms, but there's a whole subreddit dedicated to it as well. So it's like freeware, and there are just so many options out there. So yeah, magic tech definitely happens. There is a proliferation of people online that was in the infancy when I started podcasting. Same with you, Stephen. So yeah, I think, again, he hits some of the great things here. So Josh Liston, our friend and fellow podcaster about podcasting from Australia, said, so much has changed, but what comes to mind as primarily a podcast listener and fan is that shows where you can hear the hosts reading the majority of their show, like I was doing myself on the Bubble podcast in 2015, feels a lot more unnatural than it did 8 to 10 years ago. I feel like we're in a post-Ira Glass era of podcasting. Also, I find I've grown tired of shows with an obvious shtick that hasn't evolved or changed. Back to Work and Roderick on the Line are two shows that come to mind. Both are shows I still enjoy, but I can't listen to more than 1 or 2 episodes per month. Whereas when I discovered them, I listened to their entire back catalog in record time and kept listening weekly up to 2020-ish. Maybe podcasting hasn't changed, but my tastes have. Josh, that is such a keen observation. Stephen, I think your tastes have changed. I know my tastes have changed over the years. And that's great because there's so many podcasts out there that you can change, and you can still have a bunch of podcasts to listen to.
You know, if we had way more time, like say, for example, somebody wanted to pay us to quit our jobs and spend more time podcasting, I would love to go back and listen to all of our past episodes, because I know for a fact that you and I were very strongly opinionated about certain workflows and things specifically in editing that I think we have both relaxed on because we have changed with time on, you know, the general acceptance by the podcast community or the listening community, the way that we feel our time should be spent. And it would be really interesting to hear back on ourselves and things go, wow, okay, disagree with that now, you know, disagree with ourselves, because I think tastes do change.
I think you just originated a new segment for Better Podcasting, where we go back and we listen and go, oh yeah, that's changed. And we actually have a whole segment where we quote it ourselves or play the clip and go, okay, well, here's where we are in 2024 or 2025 or something like that with it. So I think that's pretty cool. We haven't taken any of our old episodes down, by the way. They're all still available for everybody, even the ones that talk about Blab.
R.I.P. Blab. That's going to take us to the end of a little bit longer than normal show. We know it, but you know what? We were away last week, so it's like we're shorter if you divide it by 2.
It's like we should have recorded this one first and divided it.
But thank you for checking out this show. We will be back again next week with another media host review. If you didn't know that, that's what we've been doing this season, is reviewing media hosts. Please go to betterpodcasting.com. Check out all the past episodes over there. I gotta say, stepping back, having a week to step back and really think about things. I know we have a short list. We're gonna keep that short list going. My actual, in my mind, short list is much shorter. Just kind of looking at the holistic picture, the whole big grand picture. Yeah. But I'm glad we're keeping our criteria-based short list going, and I look forward to our post-review end of season discussion where we can just recap it all.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. And as a tease for next week, this is an unconventional media host provider that the more I think about it, the more I'm like, this is actually not that bad of an idea. So stay tuned. We'll talk about it next week.
So for episode number 297 of Better Podcasting, I'm Stephen saying, you know what? We haven't mentioned Substack this week. SP, isn't that your favorite?
Substack! We'll see everybody next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for checking out another episode of Better Podcasting. You can find the full back catalog of Better Podcasting at betterpodcasting.com. If you're into geeky podcasts, please check out the other podcasts on the Gonna Geek Network at gonnageeknetwork.com. This show was produced and edited by Stephen Jondrew. Voice work was done by L.W. Salinas. Thanks again for listening or watching, and we hope to see you again next week.